Ladies and gentlemen, happy Sunday night to everybody out there in Unlock the Middle Land. As you know, Sunday nights are a special night for all of us here as we try to make sure we bring everybody together to do all the things we're supposed to do on Sunday nights. Josh Tovar is with me tonight from Texas. I'm going to cut that off 1 second. We don't need that noise anymore. But listen, Sunday nights are all about getting better together. I'm Dean Packard. I'm the principal at Charlton Middle School, Charlton, Massachusetts. And I have alongside me tonight, Josh Tovar from Texas. Josh, how are you, my friend?
Hey, happy Labor Day holiday for everybody. Josh Tovar, proud principal of Memorial Pathway Academy in Garland ISD, Garland, USA. Welcoming everybody to the flagship of Unlock the Middle's programs. Remember, we have the Red Zone and we have office hours, but tonight's a flagship program at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you don't watch us right now, make sure that you like us and share it with somebody else. And we're very excited to have a great guest, great author, podcaster. We'll get more into that, but you know what? Don't forget, we're part of the Fantastic Four with Shika, with Coach Hurt, with Principal Cafele, and we're finishing off today, and Roz on Tuesday. But we're all together because this is free PD for everybody. You don't have to be paying $1,000 out of your Title I. This is all free for you to take.
Or your ESSER funding. Come on. It's free. Come on and join in with us and try to figure out what's going on. I love that, Josh.
So we're ready to rock and roll. So wherever you're at, Alaska or Hawaii, whether you're in Maine or you're in Florida or in the 48 in the middle, join us today. And then later on, let us know what you think of tonight's guest.
Absolutely. And tonight's guest, Lainie Rowell, she's going to be incredible. You know, not only an author, but also a consultant, national speaker. I mean, she's got a lot of things going for her. And you know what? I'm really excited to be able to talk to her a little bit about her why and what's made her so important in the world of education, Josh. And I don't know how much you've gotten to know a little about her, but it's going to be a fun night.
You know, I have the pleasure of being part of the Twitter sphere. And then, you know, you get into those Twitter chats, so on and so forth. And she came to light, you know, she came on my feed and something told me, let's follow her. Let's see what's going on. And I've heard all of her podcasts. Please make sure that you go to whatever format that you use. If you go to the Apple stuff or Spotify, follow her and she'll talk about it later on. But it's something that I always start off my day for the last 20 something days with her because it's always about being grateful, gratitude. And it's one of those things that we really have missed in public education. But you know what? I'll let her address it because it's her podcast.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Why don't we bring her in and we'll get a little bit about her. We'll find out, just have some fun here tonight. Lainie, welcome to the show tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. This is so fun. I'm honored to be here.
Our pleasure. Unlock the Middle is all about getting better, and you're somebody that we want to put right in the middle of our fairway to talk a little bit about why you've kind of become what you've become and how you've become what you've become, because I'll tell you what, everybody has their story and everybody has their journey. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and kind of what has gotten you to where you are today?
Sure. So I'll try and do a somewhat abbreviated. Won't start with I was born on a cold winter night or anything like that. Wouldn't be true anyways. I was born in August. But at any rate, I was a psychology major at San Diego State, and I was placed in a school for my field hours. Fell in love with working with kids, and I like to say I changed lanes without signaling and decided to become an educator instead of pursuing therapy or other counseling roles that I could have done with my psychology degree. I really just fell in love with, building community and positive classroom culture. And, I was doing a lot of like classroom meetings and all these things to really bring the positive into the classroom, bring the things that I had learned in my psychology major in. And along the way, I actually got introduced to how technology could meet the needs of our learners in different ways when it's, implemented well. So I got really into that. I worked for Apple for a number of years after I left my district position. I was a classroom teacher and a district leader. And then I ended up working for Apple for a while. And I've been an international consultant for quite a while now. So I get to travel all over. I do a lot of work in the United States, but I do go abroad as well. And so it's really fun to get to see all the wonderful things that are happening in schools across the states and everywhere in the world.
So I'm going to just dig in for a second. International consultant. What the heck does that mean? Tell the people out there what that really, really does mean.
So I do speak in different countries, and I have not hit every continent, but I have been around and into different countries. And then obviously I actually happen to have a background in online and blended learning. During shutdown, I was actually speaking in quite a number of countries via Zoom, trying to help everyone as much as I could with what I had learned. Different situation, obviously, emergency, remote teaching versus what I had been, trained is not the right word, but my experience in online, how to do that with all of the best pedagogy possible. So that's how I define international.
Yeah,
I go to other countries.
that's really cool. And I'll tell you what, talk about stepping out of your comfort zone. That is something that, we as principals, we're kind of right in the middle of what we do, but to be able to step out and do that and try to give more to more people, that's fantastic. Good for you. Josh, why don't you lead us off tonight?
So, Lainie, like I stated earlier, I've had the pleasure of hearing a lot of your thoughts, your ideas, your why, so on and so forth. It's been a great asset to me as an educator. And it doesn't matter that, turning into 3 decades into this business, we can always learn from others, and I'm learning from you and the guests that you bring onto your podcast. So based on that, who has influenced you? Who has brought that why into you and those experiences that has made you a better professional in the educational field? That when you go out to different continents, you're able to say, hey, you know what? And also this. Who influences you?
Oh, there's so many people. I mean, I will definitely give a shout out to Alan November. He early on in my career gave me many opportunities and taught me many, many things. He is definitely part of the reason I especially got to that international part. There's really been so many different people, and I would also say it's really been kind of my mindset of, like you're talking about, Josh, that continuous improvement. It doesn't matter if you've been in the classroom 1 year, 10 years, 30 years, however long it is, you always have more to learn in any role that you're in. And so that mindset of continuous improvement, and that was actually my first book that I wrote with Christy Andre and Lauren Steinman, was Evolving Learner. And that whole concept was about continuous improvement through cycles of inquiry and how we can always be learning from kids, peers, and the world. So while I give a huge shout out to Alan November, and there have been others who have played such a critical role in helping me be better so that I can help others, I would just say in general, like, it's kids, peers, and the world. So it's the kids that I got to work with in my classroom. It's the kids I still get to go work with when I go and visit campuses and do, pineapple visits or any of those things. There's all these opportunities to learn from kids, but then also my peers. I'm learning from the two of you right now, and there's people I'm reading their messages in the chat, and there's people on social media. That's what I would kind of consider the world. So there's just so many opportunities to continue to learn, and that's just one of the greatest joys of being an educator.
Well, speaking about continuing to learn, you started a podcast. Why don't you talk a little bit about what your podcast is all about and how you're giving back to the people in the world of education?
Yeah. So my most recent podcast, I've done a few actually, but my most recent podcast is called Evolving with Gratitude, and it is kind of the companion to the book. And I really, just spent such an intense amount of time and a deep dive on gratitude to write the book. And honestly, once I kind of sent the book off to the editors for them to do their initial review, I was kind of sad that I wasn't, it was like kind of done, and I had more that I wanted to explore. So I thought, what, the podcast will be great. There's 20 educators via 18 stories in the book. I got to hear what they feel about gratitude, how they experience and express it, but I want to hear from way more people. So the podcast was a way for me to bring people in and ask them to share. I'll just say quickly, and I can expand on this more later, but one of the big takeaways from the book was there's no one way to experience or express gratitude. And so that's why it was so critical to have all those voices in the book. And now the podcast, I get to keep going and having new ones. And Josh, you're so kind. You've listened to the episodes, and you said before we got on, after the trash talking, that that I get it. that even though my questions don't change, what everyone says is always different. Like I can ask both of you, what does gratitude mean to you? And you're both going to give me a different answer, right?
Sure.
And so that's
Sure.
what's been keeping that interesting for me, and hopefully the listeners.
And just as we're addressing this part, to dive into this, how do you feel that social media, specifically your Twitter connections, have helped this message go out, or how can the use of social media and other similar platforms help with the message of gratitude with our colleagues in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, social media is such a great amplifier. And, I often share that when I tell people, not part of my PLN on Twitter, not part of my professional learning family on Twitter, when I tell other people that I really appreciate how much I get to learn on Twitter, they're usually kind of shocked. Like, wait, what? Like, Twitter is where people go to be nasty. And I'm like, not my Twitter. I have very much curated a community where I'm not seeing a lot of that. And so one of the best purposes for me for social media is to amplify others. And so, I'm trying to be really mindful of how much time I spend on devices, because I want to be intentional with my time with my family and my friends and all the people who I get to have in-person experiences with. And I don't want to be head down on that too much. It's important to me. So I'm always trying to think about, if I'm going to get on social media, am I going to learn? Am I going to share? Or am I going to express gratitude? Because for me, if I'm doing one of those three things, that's a good use of my time. But I don't, unless it's for learning, but I don't spend a lot of time just, scrolling through my feed or anything like that. If I have something to learn about, I'm usually searching it. If I have something to share, I'm sharing it. And if I have some gratitude I can express, I'm amplifying it that way.
Lainie, let's talk about gratitude and kind of from where the beginning points of this, the origins of it, and why you feel it's so important to be able to expound upon it in the world that we're in today. Obviously, it's a tough world. It's a dog eat dog. It's kind of, and I hate to use that analogy, but it's people have to understand that gratitude, empathy, compassion, those are three pillars that are just so important for anyone to grow. So why don't you talk just a little bit about that if you can? And I know that might be off a little bit of the questions that we're going to ask you, but I'm just curious from your lens.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it in any way. So honestly, if you had told me probably 3 years ago I was going to be writing a book about gratitude, I would have probably been a little perplexed. Like, what? I'm going to take a deep dive on gratitude. Like, everyone knows gratitude is important, right? But in the events that have happened and unfolded. So first of all, I'll say, like, March 13th, 2020, that's like what people will be asking.
Very well.
Where were you? What happened to you on March, at least for here in North America? And I would say that I was pretty annoyed. That was the launch of my first book. Literally came out March 13th of 2020. Gratitude is not what I was feeling. Let me be clear. That is not the emotion that was overwhelming me. I was scared. I don't like uncertainty. I'm super impatient. I'm just going to reveal all the challenges that I face. And so I really, really struggled. And then I think I came across it about a week later, but Laura Kelly Fanucci put a poem out on Instagram called When This Is Over. And it was this really beautiful, I never do it justice, but a few of the lines are: a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbors. And it was just this very profound, like, hey, let's really reflect on all the things that we had and how we should be grateful for them. And it also kind of empowered me to be grateful for what I had, even though I didn't get to appreciate the full shelves of the store. And we were all fighting over, how do we get toilet paper and things like that. But I was home safe with my family. And there were things that I could be grateful for. So I really started to focus on gratitude. I made a gratitude jar for my family. We were journaling. I made gratitude jars for everyone in my neighborhood. I just passed them out, and I kind of thought, well, they'll probably laugh at this, but they can stick it in a corner and it's kind of cute and all that. But then, like, within weeks and even into months, I had my neighbors coming back to me being like, oh my gosh, this like changed us. This little jar that you gave us changed us. And that was like a really big wake up call for me.
Talk about that jar. What is the jar? What is that?
It is an empty jar. It doesn't need to be fancy. You could use a mason jar. And you just once a day, or as often as you like, but you shoot for once a day, think about something that's good in your life and try and do it with specificity. So it's not just like, I'm grateful to be alive. You want to try and be as specific as you can and really think about that. And you just put it in there. And then the idea is you collect them over time. And when you're having a bad day, you dump out the jar and you start to read some of those things. Helps you become a little, more present to what you actually have, and brings you some joy there. Helps you shift out of it.
Nice. I like that. Josh?
Oh, and I'll be stealing that soon, just so you know. I just don't know how to implement it at the campus level, but I'll be stealing that one. Hey, Lainie, you brought it up, that beautiful date in March when the whole world changed. But you see, you have a different view of education because you've seen it international, okay? And I've always said this, that we all have a great opinion of education within our paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
But then you see, from the classroom level, it's different from the assistant principal, it's different from the principal, it's different from the area superintendent, from the superintendent, from the board members. You see, everyone has a different scope of what education is, especially if let's say you've only been in a school, only one school compared to 10 schools. You have a different point of view of education because either you've been set in one way in one community or you've been in different ones. What do I mean by all that? Now that you've seen and you're able to connect with different people across the world, what have you seen are the major gaps in education for our kids? Or how can we support our team members with these gaps, or helping them out? Gratitude is important, making sure that the kids care, that they know that we care about them. But what are you seeing internationally with the effects of the pandemic?
It's interesting. When we first went into the pandemic and, March, like I said, March 13th, we know that for North America, and that was also for a large part of the world. It was interesting when I was doing these conversations, where I was zooming in, people from Ireland and Asia and just all South America, all over the world, different countries, different continents. And there was this very interesting time where we were all in a very similar situation, right? If you think of that historically, like in what time have we been in this similar situation where we're all in lockdown pretty much, where everyone's facing the same struggles to some extent. We all have our unique struggles, but there's kind of these big global struggles that we're all facing. And I think what became apparent through that is the importance of relationships, the importance of being learner focused, learner centered. And I use the word learner to talk about adults and kids, because to me, that's like a huge part of my work. Is it's not, obviously the kids are so important, and so are the adults. And so we want to make sure that we're nurturing all of them. We can hear like whole child, whole teacher. We want to make sure we're there supporting everyone in the learning community. And so I think that's kind of where I kind of zoomed in. And this is something it's a framework I pulled from my online teaching experience, is the community of inquiry framework. If you're not familiar with it, the three, like think of a Venn diagram. There's a little circle for one that says teaching presence, one that says cognitive presence, and one that says social presence. So you want to be in the middle as much as possible, where you're addressing all of those things. But I think when you kind of zoom out and you're like, okay, what do we need to have happen in education? We need to make sure we're hitting all three of those. Now, how people do that, there's a lot of freedom and choice in that. We don't all have to do teaching presence the exact same way, but we have to make sure that we are doing those intentional things to build those one-on-one relationships, to make sure that every child, every adult knows we assume positive intent, we have complete positive regard, we are there for them, and we will, design and adapt and be there for them to support them through. The social presence, making sure the interpersonal is happening. And then, of course, the cognitive presence, co-constructing knowledge and all that stuff. So sorry to geek out on that framework for a minute.
That's huge.
That was kind of like what I had to zoom out in March of 2020, when like everything is, and I'm a consultant, so I'm canceling flights right and left. Like I have to pivot so quickly. And that was what I jumped to. I'm like, okay, community of inquiry. This is what we all need. We all need to be focusing on whatever our setting is, that we're making sure we have the teaching presence, the cognitive presence, the social presence. If we're getting those, our learning communities are strong.
Lainie, I love the fact that you're really building upon relationships with students, because that's the number one most important thing for any type of learning to take place. What about the learning relationship with colleagues? Let's try to peel this backwards, okay? In my opening statement, when I say to my faculty, I say, listen, we don't have anything if we don't have each other. Don't ever forget that. If we can't back each other and build upon each other, we'll never grow as a team. I don't know a team out there that doesn't understand the roles of each other and the end result. So talk about the importance of gratitude within the work confines. What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's real interesting as educators. We in different roles obviously are different, but there can be a lot of loneliness, honestly, in education, because as a principal, you have a certain type of loneliness. You need to be connecting with other principals, other leaders. In the classroom, you have a certain type of like, okay, I'm connecting with my kids, but I need to connect with my peers too. So we can be really intentional in using gratitude as a way to nurture those relationships. And so it's being specific, being authentic, and trying to really build that into your practices. I'll just give you a leader example of this, which is one of my favorite ones because it's so simple. Is a principal just takes a Post-it note and a pencil and walks around campus and does informal, like just pop-ins. Now, of course, the culture has to be established that this is non-evaluative. I'm going to pop into your classroom from time to time. But they just write a Post-it note saying something that they appreciated. I really appreciated how engaged your students were. I loved how much prep you had put into this to make sure it was as successful as possible. Whatever it is, but trying to be as specific as possible. And you just leave it like on the whiteboard, wherever it's not going to be too distracting if they're in the middle of a lesson. But the first principal that told me about this said that she loved doing this so much, she ended up doing it for kids too. And she would just drop a Post-it note on the student's desk. And then that Post-it note ends up on their refrigerator at home. And it's like this beautiful, positive thing. And so there's just so many different ways that we can do it. We want to be specific. We want to be authentic. And I think that that's really how we can nurture those relationships. But, also really develop that sense of belonging. We're all here for each other. That isn't, we're not always set up for that naturally in a school environment, because we could, if we wanted to, just go in, close our doors and be in our classroom. And then maybe once a week or once a month or however often we have faculty meetings, that's when we see each other. But we can be super intentional. And one more thing I'll say really quickly is I love CASTLE's 3 signature practices: welcoming inclusion activity, engaging strategies, and optimistic closure. So when you're planning a faculty meeting or a meeting with class session, I encourage you to think about, is there a way to bring gratitude into one of those? Could it be part of your welcoming inclusion activity? Could it be an engaging strategy, or could it be an optimistic closure? And I think that's the way we bring it in for both kids and adults.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate what you just said, because that's also important for success of any leadership person. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what? I keep on saying that it's crucial that the people that sit in our chairs are the number one role models for what the expectation is. The administrators are the ones that need to show our team members specifically what the vision is. And if we say connect with kids, then that means we need to provide the strategies on the how to. We just can't say to our team leads, you do it, or department heads, you do it. It has to come from us. And also provide them the opportunity and say, you know what? It's okay to get away from the curriculum. Connect with your kids. Give them the permission. Kevin Curtis in one of his podcasts said that we need to give them the holy water, for lack of a better example, to say connect with kids. Put the learning to the side, because there was that gap that we talked about earlier when they were living at home, not doing anything. And what are schools going through right now, Dean? And I'm pretty sure you've heard this, Lainie. The kids that we lost during the pandemic are coming back, and they don't want to come back.
Yeah.
They're here in body, they ain't here in mind. And they're not going to go back to the way it was. So my question to you is this. How can we get back to that old system of teaching, the joy of learning? How can we make sure that we try to bond everything together with what you've seen throughout the different continents? What are some strategies that we could help our colleagues in the classroom implement?
Well, and I think you both have said it. It's that modeling from leaders, and then teachers are modeling that to kids, and it's all very contagious, right? And so, one of the things that I like to say is the best way to change someone else's behavior is to change your behavior first. So if I am modeling these things, if I am, and I'll just say, like, in the classroom, I'll just go to something very, very specific. So I think about the praise to correction ratio. This comes from back when I was getting my degree in psychology. I was taught 6 positives to every 1 negative. So when you're trying to change someone's behavior, you don't keep pounding on them for what they're doing wrong. That doesn't do anything but damage the relationship. You have to look for the good in them. You have to try and catch them doing things so much that overwhelmingly they feel seen for the positive. And then that way, when you do correct them, they notice it and they go, oh, okay, yeah, I can fix that. That's one little thing. All these other things they saw me doing I was great at, I can fix this one little thing, right? So that's like a really specific thing. If that's too specific, let me know. But that's one of the things I think about for in the classroom and for adults, honestly, working with other adults. I don't want to keep nagging someone. Like, why haven't you gotten me this? Why haven't you, try and find the positive. I like to look at VIA character strengths. And, they've got bravery, they've got gratitude, they've got so many different positive character strengths you can look at, and you can find something. Maybe it is bravery. That's fine, because maybe you have a really bold student. So commend them for being brave. Find those good things in people, because that's when you build the relationship. That's when you build the trust. And that's when they will respond to you when you are asking them to do the things that we need them to do to learn.
Lainie, let's talk a little bit about educators in general, the joy in teaching. And, I think every educator you talk to, they get into teaching because they love kids and they love the ability to sell their craft. With coming out of post-COVID, it's easy to say that we've lost that joy. We're now chasing our tail. We got to make sure our jobs are fun. How do you regain that enjoyment? Because you know what, there's a lot of pressure on teachers today, and there's not a lot of teachers coming into this field. It's a shortage. We struggled to fill spots this year. It's not the position that people want. How do we bring that joy back? What does that look like?
Yeah. And Josh, you were talking about this last week, having to fill spots. I think I heard you say that last week.
Yeah.
That's really, really tough. And I think that we have to really dig deep. First of all, I would say gratitude is definitely an important one. You have to model that. You have to build that community, build that social contagion, that emotional contagion around gratitude. I also think we have to start looking at what can we take away off of people's plates, because there is so much, and it feels like, that's probably out of my almost, approaching 30 years, whatever, 25 plus years in education. It's always an adding on and a never removing. So we have to be super critical in thinking about what can we take off of each other's plates so that we can focus on the thing that we came here to do, that we love, that we want to teach, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that keeps getting piled on. I think that makes it difficult. I will say, there's so much more focus. I was talking to a superintendent last week, and I was like, okay, well, what have you talked about as far as well-being? And she rattled off so many things. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm so glad these things were, I had never, prior to the pandemic, heard of, wellness practices being openly discussed during staff meetings with principals and things like that. So I feel like that's coming in. I want to make sure that stays. And that when we're encouraging them to do this, we're not saying like, okay, hey, find a good balance. I know can be a triggering word, but just balance, meaning like at any given moment, you feel confident you can handle what you need to. I get that from Mandy Freilich. But don't be encouraging that and then emailing them all weekend. Like that doesn't send the right message, right? So I think we have to, again, it comes back to modeling.
Yeah. And again, I to all the educators out there listening, find that inside of you, what makes you you. Just find that little piece. Whether it's connecting with kids in some capacity, whether it's sharing out with colleagues, whether it's just whatever it is, man, you've got to build upon it, because our profession is so important, and we will never be successful without educators. We need you. We need those teachers, not only to love kids, but to be able to understand the depth of teaching and what that means to remove all barriers for kids so they can can be as successful as possible. And it's hard. I'm telling you, it's probably the hardest job out there today. Josh, would you agree?
It's 100%, and you see it in our team members' body and demeanor.
Yeah.
And even the brand new ones have this. The brand new team members to the profession have the deer in the eyes even bigger, like the cartoons now. You know, the three eyes on top of each other, because everybody else is still with the open eyes, the tenured team members. And so it's up to us sitting in our chairs to make sure that we provide that Linus blanket, that comfort zone, making sure that we appreciate them and remind them, hey, it's okay.
It's
Just
okay.
calm down. It's okay to
Relax. Yeah.
calm down. It's okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think also it's appreciating that we're all unique and dynamic. And so when I, kind of circling back to that community of inquiry, I think we could all agree those are important things. We have to have the social presence, the cognitive presence, and the teaching presence. But how each teacher does that can be different. And that doesn't make it wrong. And I think when we appreciate that there's more than one way to do something, that helps people find their joy too.
Correct.
It's not just you have to do it this way. It's here's what we need to have accomplished. Now figure out the ways that work best for you. We're here to support you. We'll give you some options. Choose what's best for you and your learners. And I think that helps.
Lainie, I'll also say that leaders out there across the country that give the autonomy for teachers to be themselves, to be creative, are the ones that allow those teachers to grow, to take those risks. And the older I get and the longer I sit in administration, I back off. I just back off. I'll steer them. I will steer them and I'll tell them yes or no. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be in their head because I want them to be thinking and imagining and dreaming about tomorrow. I want them to be thinking about how kids can have the best experiences. And if I do that as a leader, guess what? They run. They run and they know evaluation is not, I don't have to look over your shoulder. I'm not going to evaluate you on a mistake. I'm going to evaluate you on your connectivity with kids and your ability to help them teach kids. That's it. I want you to take risks. I want you to do silly things, especially at the middle level. You kidding? Between 10 and 14, those kids want you to be kind of goofy. And I'm probably the biggest goof out there. There's no doubt about it. So I'll just leave it at that. What do you say to that, Josh?
I just think that I agree. You're the biggest goof out
Thanks.
there. But
I appreciate
it. Follow him on Twitter.
Yeah, follow him on Twitter. Yeah, he might help you out.
So just, Lainie, I mentioned it and I really want to, we talked about your podcast earlier. I love it. And I just want you to present to our listeners. You have 21 shows so far. I want you to let them know, hey, like when you go to 31 Flavors and you say, hey, try this one. Who would you like to spotlight right now? They're all great. We're not putting it just like your shout out. You know how people feel about the shout out. Okay. Well, now I'm turning the script on you.
This is karma. I hear it coming. Yeah.
So part of this show, everybody, who would you like our viewers to go follow you and say, hey, you know what? This is symbolic of what our beliefs are in this podcast.
Yeah. So may I highlight a few real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Please.
So episode number 1 is with my very, very good friend and mentor, George Couros. He is a huge reason that this book, Evolving with Gratitude, is available. And that's not just because he is I Am Press and one of the publishers. He asked me to write for Because of a Teacher. And that book and writing a chapter in that book, I've had so much joy in that. That was definitely one of the things that happened that led me to write this book. So I would definitely, I think George is very inspiring. I would definitely check out that episode. I also think I always have to recommend Katie Novak because she is just so awesome. She's such a delight. She manages to bring me so much joy and also stretch my thinking at the same time. So I really, really love that episode. And now I'm going to start to get in trouble if I don't mention other names, but those are really good ones to start. Okay, one more. I'm going to give a shout out to Josh Stamper. There is a theme and an awareness that I walked away with after writing this book and especially reading the stories. And that is that there is more than one way to experience and express gratitude. And Josh is very intentional with this. His story in the book talks about the 5 love languages or 5, workplace appreciation. And he talks about that on the podcast as well. And he's so intentional. Dwight Carter also very intentional in how do we, right? Another great episode. I could just list them all, but I won't. But Dwight Carter and Josh are leaders who are very intentional in, I'm going to be specific and authentic. I'm going to make sure that everyone feels, heard, seen, known, and valued. And I think that's really, really important.
So talk a little about George Couros a little bit more, because it sounds very instrumental. And George, if you're new to the field out there, he is a guru. He's out there. He is somebody that you should follow. There's no doubt about that. And, he's definitely a pioneer. So how was he so instrumental in helping you, besides, helping you with the book?
So I met George, actually I met him years ago, but when he had me on his podcast, it's kind of like the pre-show, he doesn't have a set start time. So I think our pre-show was like 90 minutes. So we talked for a very long time before he hit record, and I was just so in awe. And then really just watching him, and he is definitely a gratitude mentor to me. He is so intentional in making sure to lift others up and to, call out all the wonderful things that other people are doing. And I really started to notice that as we became really good friends. And like I said, when he invited me to write a chapter in Because of a Teacher, the fact that he had dedicated a whole book, like, love letters to teachers, to administrators, just was so beautiful. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was actually Steph Rothstein, who, after Because of a Teacher came out, and I had written about a principal who was so pivotal in moving me into leadership. I wrote about her. I was so excited to give her the book so she could have, read this chapter. And Steph sends me a text message and she's like, Lainie, I feel like you could write a whole book on just being grateful for writing and Because of a Teacher. I was like, I know, because George gave me this opportunity and it was so beautiful. And so that's why, there's so many ways that George was instrumental, just as the person he is, the opportunities he's given me, and then supporting me in writing this book. I mean, Impress is, he's Dave and Shelley and Paige and George. That's the Impress publishers. So I was very, very happy when they were interested in putting this book out there.
Dive into that book a little bit for us, please, will you? Please.
Absolutely.
And where people can get it. Just let's talk about it. Come on.
Yeah. So so I'll just tell you, I don't know if either of you had a chance to read Dan Pink's A Whole New Mind, but it came out a long time ago, and I never forgot the format of this book, because in the first part of the book, Dan Pink talks about why all these different things are so important, why it's important to be a storyteller, and he makes the case for it. And then the whole second half are like, okay, here's how to do it. So that was kind of my sketched out, this is what I want the format to be. So I start off the book talking about why gratitude's important. This is how we can do it, specific strategies, building habits, things like that. Talking about the benefits, like the fact that it helps us cope with stress, regulate our emotions, makes us happier, nurtures relationships, and then magically actually activates learning. It's not just about the SEL, which is obviously critical and important, but it actually does have an impact on learning as well. So the first part of that first part of the book is that, and then I go on to talk about gratitude with kids, gratitude with peers, gratitude with the world. Those are 3 different chapters, and within each of those chapters, I kind of started off, and then there's little stories, quick stories from educators around the world who are sharing okay, here's gratitude with kids as I see it. Like Rochelle Dene Poth wrote about, grateful for her students. And then, Dwight and Joshua have also mentioned, but Lauren Kaufman is in with peers, kind of from that leadership perspective. There's so many more. Again, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm not going to name them all, but so many good ones. And since we're talking about Unlock the Middle, I just have to give a shout out to Che and Pav, who wrote a story about middle school in the Gratitude for Kids chapter. So it all came together. It was a very intense process. The book was published in less than 10 months, start to finish. I did it in 10 months because I could not do anything else. I was so it like poured out of me. I wanted to learn this and I wanted to share it. And so I'm very, very excited about it. When I went to Paige and George and I said, I want to write this book, I said, my goal is to keep it around 100 pages because people are busy. Yeah. And Paige Currow said, you know that saying, right? I would have written a shorter book, but I didn't have time. And I said, I know, because it is hard to write a short book, but I was very good at editing myself and I kept it as concise as could be. And so I'm really excited about it. And I hope people will check it out.
Where can they find it? Where can they get it if they have to?
Yep. It's, Amazon is typically where people go. So Evolving with Gratitude on Amazon is really easy to find it, but you'll find it on all the places. You could go to Barnes and Noble and order it from there. And so, yeah, I hope people check it out. Feel free to, and if you end up getting a copy, let me know and I'll send some fun stuff your way, like some stickers and a signed book plate. I'm always happy to share some appreciation for you taking a look at the book.
Nice. What do you think of that, Josh?
I think we had an awesome guest today showing her awesomeness to all of the United States and around the world. Thank you very much, Lainie, for being here tonight and sharing your experiences and most importantly, your message of being greatness towards colleagues, towards our kids, the future of America. Thank you very much, Lainie, for being here. And you know what? Don't forget to come and join us this Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern for the Red Zone. It is football season, and we're ready to score a touchdown. We have some guests. Aubrey's going to be in the house. Don Epps is going to be in the house. Dr. Brett Ringo's going to be in the house. Some other educators will be around. So we discuss what's going on in the classroom, in the school building. So join us for the Red Zone. Let's score a touchdown together this Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. What do you think about that, Dean?
I think we scored about 5 touchdowns tonight with Lainie. So again, Lainie, thank you so much. I tell you what, don't stop doing what you're doing. You're a pioneer making a difference in the world of education. You know, gratitude is at the cornerstone of what everybody needs to understand to become better. So really, sincerely, thank you very much from a 20-year veteran in the administrative shoes. And, I hope that people out there will retweet that and reshare this because at the end of the day, it's all about getting better together. So thank you so much. Lainie, last words. What would you like to say to the followers out there?
Well, just thank you for anyone who's watching or listening in, and Dean and Josh, thank you, because I really appreciate everything you're doing, and I see you putting out all the good stuff on the socials, and thanks for making me better.
Well, we're never going to stop, and you're part of that family. So in that circle, we're going to keep tagging you with things, and I'll tell you what, let's keep growing together. Josh, take us home. What do you think? Anything we're missing?
We got it covered. Enjoy the rest of your Labor Day weekend. Relax. Be grateful for everything that we have. Love your family, kiss your family, and enjoy the remaining day off. Thank you from Unlock the Middle.
Hey, that's all we have. Lainie, we'll talk to you. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great week next week. Take care, everybody.